Hello, good to be here and good to have you here. Welcome to Prep Station Government, where we'll be looking at some UTME tricky government questions. We'll be discussing some topics. The first topic we'll be looking at constitution and constitutionalism. And the second topic we'll be looking at is structure and organization of government. Structure and organization of government. What are we going to be looking at? The legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. This falls under the structure and organization of government. Third, the next one we'll be looking at citizens' rights. Citizens' rights. Looking at the duties and obligations of an individual in a state. What are your duties as a Nigerian citizen? What are your obligations? These are the things we'll be looking at. Then we'll go to the pre-colonial political systems in Nigeria. Yes, quite an interesting topic. We'll be looking at pre-colonial administration in House of Fulani, pre-colonial administration in Igbo land, pre-colonial administration in Yoruba land. Then we'll look at colonial administration. First of all, we'll look at what colonialism is all about. We'll talk about indirect rule and all that. Then we'll come down to nationalism. Nationalism. We're looking at nationalism. Then we'll look at the constitutional development in Nigeria. The constitutional development in Nigeria. Pre-independence constitution. Topics like the Clifford Constitution of 1922, the Richard Constitution of 1946, and the Littleton and Macpherson and the Littleton Constitution, respectively. Then finally, we'll round it off with military rule in Nigeria. That's what we'll be rounding. We'll draw the curtains on military rule in Nigeria. So, thank you. Join me as we take this wonderful ride. Okay. Now, beginning with constitution. We're looking at what's the meaning of constitution. Yeah, constitution. SS1 topic, yes. Constitution, remember we said, is defined as a whole body of fundamental laws, customs, conventions, principles, rules, and regulations, according to which a particular government or of a country or an organization is governed. Constitutions differs with, there are different constitutions that is suitable for different countries, but there are some basic things you need to understand. It must protect the interest of the individual, the interest of the citizens. Take note of this. So we'll be looking at constitution. Now, we've just described or explained the meaning of constitution, the whole body of rules, principles, rules and regulations that governs a particular country. Now let's look at constitutionalism. They sound alike, but they are not the same. Constitutionalism is a strict adherence. That means government acting according to the laid down constitution already, following the laid down constitution. I just paraphrased it. Following the laid down constitution. So it says, constitution is strict adherence to or compliance with the provisions of the constitution. The rulers and the ruled abide by the provisions of the constitution. So the constitutionalism simply means this is how it should be. Follow it. Constitution is saying this is the rule. Constitutionalism is saying this is how we should follow the laid down rule. Take note of this. Another meaning, I think I love the second one. I love the second definition of constitutionalism. It says is a means of checking the tyrannical and autocratic tendencies of the executive arm of the government on the citizen and the other two arms of the government. Do you understand? So This definition, I think I love this. So it's putting the executive arm of the government in check. This is, you don't cross the boundary. Everything you do must go according to what is laid down in the Constitution. Okay, let's look at two differences between the Constitution and constitutionalism. Constitution and constitutionalism. Number one, it says, Constitution is a written document created by the government with the participation of the civil society, while constitutionalism is a principle and a system of governance that respects the rule of law and limits the power of government. I think I love the other part. It says it's principle of a system of governance. That means the rulers must stick to the plan, respect the rule of law. You limit your activities within the confines of the Constitution. Your powers are limited within the confines of the Constitution as a government official. That is what this part is saying. Now, let's go to number 2. It says, constitutionalism is based on the principles outlined in the Constitution. Constitutionalism is based on the principle outlined that has been laid down in the Constitution, while the Constitution, on the other hand, is a legal document, but it is a principle of its own. It's a principle of its own. It's a principle of its own. It said the idea of constitutionalism is opposed to the concept of authoritarian and despotic rule. Like I said earlier, to keep leaders in check so there will be no abuse of power. Keep leaders in check so that there will be no abuse of power. It's based on the belief that the power of the government should be limited in order to prevent what? Abuses. That's just what this paraphrasing it, saying it another way. So it limits what? The powers of the government so that there will be no abuse. There will be no abuse. Okay, let's go. Let's continue. We have our first question here. We've looked at the meaning of constitution, the meaning of constitutionalism, the differences. Now we're looking at questions that may come out in UTME. So let's look at this one. Constitutionalism means dash. Constitutionalism means dash. A, promotion of the Constitution. B, respect for the Constitution. C, electoral processes based on the Constitution. D, voting, rule, and regulations. Now, the answer is B, respect for the Constitution. Remember, I said when we're defining constitutionalism, strict adherence to what is in the Constitution. Let's look at the next question. A written constitution must contain dash. A written constitution must contain dash. Remember, when we look at the features of a written constitution, you know the features, can you remember? Codified in a single document. Can you remember that? Yes. Now, it must have a preamble. It must have what? A preamble. Very important. Others are important, but it must have a preamble. Remember your written constitution. Written constitution. Nigeria practices a written constitution. I hope you remember. A written constitution is codified in a single document, and the procedures to amend it. It has it's difficult. It's a bit challenging to amend it. It doesn't have easy amendment. Do you understand? Remember. Okay, let's go to the next one. Number 3 says, a constitution of any country is basically dash. A constitution of any country is basically dash. Number one says a mere piece of paper. Constitutions are not a mere piece of paper. Please take note of that. Okay, let's go to the main answer. A document stating what the leaders should do. A guide to how the country should be governed. Yes, B. A guide to how the country should be governed. It states the roles and functions of the president, roles and functions of the legislature, the executive. Everybody know their duties. They are all laid down in the Constitution. So it's a guide to how the country should be governed. Thank you. Let's go to the next question. The principle that advocates strict adherence to the fundamental laws of a country. Now look at this question. There are two key words here. Strict adherence. And we have our options. Absolutism, collective responsibility. The answer is constitutionalism. Remember, strict adherence. Strict adherence, don't forget. Okay, let's go to the next question. Okay. Constitution formulated and imposed on a country without popular participation is said to be created by what? What do you think? Okay, snap out. Beautiful. Decree. Decree. That is why we say laws made by the military government, it's called decree. The issue out a decree. So take note, is decree, please. Okay, let's go to the next question. Which of the following is the source of a country's constitution? Can you remember sources of constitution? History of the people? Can you remember? Judicial, remember? Judicial injunction, yes. Judicial injunction happens to be one of the sources. We have history of the people and others. I just mentioned this one. Please take note of this. There are about 5 to 6 sources of constitution. There are even more. If you go through your government textbook, you see more sources. Okay, let's go. A constitution specifies the dash religious belief of the people, state of mind, modus operandi, movement of people. It cannot be religious belief of the people. The answer is modus operandi. What's the English word for modus operandi? You know? Mode of operation. Mode of operation. So the Constitution specifies the mode of operation of how the president should carry out his duties. The governors, the ministers, the executive, the legislatures, and all that. So it's mode of operation, modus operandi. Okay. Constitutions have been classified as rigid or as flexible according to dash. Whether A says whether they were written or not written, B, whether they were popular or not popular, C, the relative ease or difficulty of the writing, D, the relative ease or difficulty of the amending process. Two things. They're talking about two constitutions here, the rigid constitution and the flexible constitution. Remember, the rigid constitution faces difficulty in amending process. The flexible constitution faces ease in amending process. So what's the answer? You're right, you got it. D is the answer. D is actually the answer. Okay, next question. Constitutionalism means dash. Okay? The Constitution is largely made up of conventions. We know that it's made up of conventions, but we're looking at the meaning of constitutionalism. One of the sources of the Constitution is convention too. So the Constitution is not easy to amend. We're not talking about Constitution now, we're talking about constitutionalism. Don't get confused. The provision of the Constitution are strictly adhered to. That is the answer. I told you, strict adherence. Strict adherence. Yes. Repetition is for you to understand. That's why I keep repeating these things so that you have a better understanding of what we're saying. Okay. 10. I think this should be the last question on constitution and constitutionalism. A constitution is said to be rigid if it can only be interpreted by the military? No. Is written by different authors? No. Cannot be amended by the executive? No. Has cumbersome provisions for its amendment. The rigid and the written constitution faces this thing. Has cumbersome provisions for its amendment. So the answer is D. Well, we've come to the end of this topic, Constitution and Constitutionalism. Constitution and Constitutionalism. I hope you're able to learn some few things. Yes. So when you see questions about Constitution and Constitutionalism, they may sound alike, but they aren't the same thing. They're very different. Okay. Now we're going to structures and organization of governments. That is why you're seeing the first one. Let's go back. Meaning of the legislature. Meaning of the legislature. I hope you know that the legislature has a lot of duties, but there are specific major duties why the legislature exists. Okay, let's define meaning of legislature. I say legislature can be defined as an organization of government responsible for the making of laws, which not only given backings to government policies, but also guide interaction between government and the governed. And the governed, yes. So it is the duty, the main function of the legislature is lawmaking. Lawmaking. Now, the legislature has different names. In Nigeria, we call them the National Assembly. That's the combination of the Senate and the Federal House of Assembly. So it's called the National Assembly. In the US, it's called the Congress. Now, a quick one before we go further. How many senators do we have in Nigeria? You know, you're a government student. We have how many? 109. 109. Then we have 108 senators in the 36 states. Only Abuja has one senator, making it 109. Making it 109. Okay, I will be going for a quick break. Please, we'll soon be back. Stay tuned and just be good. Take care.